Hi, my name's Brooke Wheeler, and this video is about finishing a beaded poppy. It works for any type of beadwork where you've done the front half of it, so you can watch this to figure out how to do putting a pin in, doing the edges around the beads, and getting it back on it. I'm putting a timestamp here for where you can skip to the actual instructions, but I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Indigenous veterans and what the beaded poppy actually stands for and means. Over the many battles that Canada has participated in as a country, we've had Indigenous people in them every single time. Without a doubt, every single time, thousands of Indigenous people have showed up over the years for our country. Depending on the specific era that these people were volunteering in, they might have had to give up their Indigenous status, and that is a lot because they would still be discriminated against racially and socially, but they wouldn't obtain any of the rights that they would have to the land or resources that any Indigenous person would have had. So when they gave up these rights to go fight with us for us, they ended up taking a personal loss. And the hope was that if they fought valiantly enough, they would be able to not only save their country, but get some sort of help for themselves, their family, and their community when they came home. Even for some of the most famous names in Canadian war history, some people who literally changed the tides of entire battles and the war, coming home was not them being celebrated or cherished. So this is why we have a different day. Indigenous veterans have distinctly shown up for our country in every single battle, and yet they often receive far less. In Canada, Indigenous Veterans Day is November 7th, slightly before November 11th, our General Remembrance Day, and the month of November is our Remembrance Month. The beaded poppy is a symbol for all veterans and a symbol for remembrance, but it is especially a symbol for Indigenous veterans, and it's just to let everyone know that you acknowledge and appreciate the effort that those Indigenous people went through to secure our safety and freedom, despite it not being acknowledged in the time. When you make or wear this poppy, I want you to be aware of and think of the Indigenous peoples who helped you be in this place today. Many of the things that made Indigenous veterans so distinct while they were in active duty was knowledge that they had gained growing up as an Indigenous person in an Indigenous community. Things like being able to move silently through fields, or hunting, or stalking, or using certain types of weapons. These things came in so handy in so many areas, and I don't think people understand that it wasn't necessarily just the fact that there was a high number of Indigenous people who did particularly good things. It's that being an Indigenous person made them equipped for this. Growing up as an Indigenous person actively gave them the skills to think on their feet better and to operate better in these circumstances on average. And I'm not saying that any of these people were better than any of the white or black or other ethnic cultures that were participating. I'm just saying that the set of skills that one would get growing up on, say, a reserve or within community is very easily transferable to war in a pinch. And it's not that we want to use those skills for war, but it's just that when things happen, things happen. I think it's important to acknowledge that it was their Indigenous upbringing that made so many of these people valuable to our war effort. So this is a video where you're going to learn how to put the backing on a beaded project. For this, you're going to need your front half of your beaded project with your beading done, a needle, thread, and a needle threader if you need it, scissors. I like to put a safety pin in the back. I'll show you how to do that after. Felt for the back, and then I'm going to put some paper in the middle just to make sure that it doesn't bend too much. And then you'll also need a marker. The first thing you're going to do is look at the back of your project and see if your tails from your project are long. I like to cut mine to be about a centimeter so that they're not falling into my project and getting in the way when I'm doing other things. Then you're going to very carefully cut around your project stitches. So you're going to get as close as you can to this line without undoing any of your stitches with your scissors. That's important. As I'm going, I have my finger right along the edge of the beads so I can feel how close that I can cut on this side, but I like to have it stitched side up just so that I am extra careful to not be touching any of the stitches with the scissors. So this is currently what mine looks like. I'm going to take a little bit, if I can, and just snip at the edges so that they're a little bit cleaner. You know what, maybe I'll do this with some decent scissors later. I'm brute forcing it, guys. I can't. Okay, good enough for me. So the next step is to trace this onto a piece of felt. And I like to get as close as I can to the edge of the felt that I already have because I don't like to waste it. So I'm just gonna draw around it. And just so I have a rough shape of what it is. And then I'm also going to draw a template of it on a piece of paper. For your template, you're going to want to cut a few millimeters inside the line you draw because you actually want this to be able to fit inside. You're going to be making a little sandwich with these three things. So once you cut them out, this one, you'll just take some off the edge. I went and got different scissors. So now that we have this cut out, you can just see, you should be able to see just the hint of the color, you know, around the outline of it. It's just roughly the shape. And then you're gonna go and do the same thing to this one, just cutting a few millimeters inside the lines that you have. And now you're ready to put these three things together. So I'm just gonna sit this somewhere that I think it won't, you know, I'm gonna take a little bit more off of this just so it doesn't interfere with the stitching. It's just here to be sturdy. Okay, so I have these together. Now we're going to do something called a blanket stitch. If you've never done a blanket stitch, don't worry, I will show you many times. So, just to hide the string, this isn't particularly necessary or anything. I just like to hold them as a little sandwich and open them and poke right through like this. And then I just tie a little knot because I want it to be sturdy. And this is how I anchor it on to the project. So I'm just tying it to the back piece right now. You don't even have to be like holding the sandwich together, but I am because, you know, whatever. So, blanket stitch. You're looking at your sandwich and you're going to start somewhere. And through both pieces, you're going to stab the needle. And then you're going to put your fingers inside the loop of your string and grab the needle and pull it through. This makes a stitch that you'll see in a second. It doesn't really show up with only a couple, but you'll move a couple millimeters next to it. Reach through the loop. Grab it. And then as I'm pulling it tight, I'll show you, it does this thing where there's like an overlap. And there's a little line in between. And this is really nice because it gives you a base to put beads around the edge after as well. So just again, I'm repeating the same stitch. And then I'm just going to do this for the rest of the thing, and then I'll come back at the end to show you how to finish. So I'm at my very last stitch right here, and I want to have the same line that goes across here and here in this line. So all I'm going to do is go under my original stitch and do the same pinching motion. Sorry, this okay. Imagine I did the pinching motion, but I did the exact same thing, I promise. And then I'm just gonna knot it off a few times. Make sure that I'm securing this pretty well. I might touch a few more of the stitches by just knotting on them. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push my needle through here and just have it come out somewhere randomly on the back. And that'll hide the tail of the string. So what you can do is pull the string a little bit so there's a little bit of tension, and then snip really close. And then when you let go, since there's no tension, the thread is just hiding in here now, and it doesn't look like anything happened. So yeah, next thing we're gonna move into is putting the beads on the rim of this so you can hide a bit of that edge. So this is how you thread a needle if you can't quite get the thread through the needle hole itself. This is a needle threader, and what you're going to do is press the tiny little triangle end into the eye of your needle. And since it's a firm piece of like metal, it goes in there a lot easier than a thread. So, needle's down here. That's a lot bigger of an eye to put your thread through. So you just pop your thread through here, dead, and pull a nice bit through, make sure you've got a tail. But once that's happened, you can gently pull the needle threader out, and then you've threaded your needle. So for the edges, I like to start off at least with the first layer being a brick stitch, and I am going to show you how you do that. So I've already gone ahead and anchored my new thread in here, and you're going to take 2 beads onto your needle. Once these 2 beads are on, I'm just moving them down to show you. I'm going to go into the string that's between the 2 stitches, the top string, and I'm going to go up through just the second bead. Well, I'll pull it tight just like to show you what I mean, but I normally do it in like one motion. But it was a little hard to do on camera. Okay, so I have that under the stitch, and now I'm just going to go up through this one bead. And since I'm on the other side of the stitch, it won't undo because there's that line in the middle tacking it down. And so I'm just pulling it a little tight. It's going to sit on the edge there. And I can just add another bead, go under the next stitch or wherever I want it, then go back up through the bead and pull it tight. Watch your thread because it can tangle, so just make sure that as you're pulling it tight, you're being careful of how your thread is acting. But yeah, I will do it a few more times, and then again I will show you at the end how to close it up. So we have our bead. We're going through the spot where I want it to sit. I'm going back through the bead from the bottom to the top of the bead. I'm gently pulling string until there's no excess. Bead through the thing. I'm just gonna hold this string there for a second. Back through the bead. And then I'm going to gently just make sure that nothing gets tangled as I do this. Now that you're at your last bead and you've done all of the things that would have happened before, you're just going to go back down through the next bead and then once you have that bead caught, you can loop it under the string in between those two beads so that it's sort of like mimicking what would have happened if that bead was put on the same way as all the others, and then it doesn't look any different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tie a few knots around here just to make sure this thread is secured. And then, since personally I'm not a fan of this ragged edge and I didn't actually get to cut down my felt anymore because of my scissors, I'm just going to go around and put an edge of these beads on top, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. So very much like a basic stitch, I'm just going to load a few of these beads onto my needle and then pin them down where they line up. I think I'll do 4. We'll see how 4 goes. Since the size of the beads is different, it can be a little bit different in the way that you want them spaced or tacked, so I'm just going to hold them down. So instead of stabbing all the way through like I would have before, I'm just going to loop under this thread because I don't want to go and leave any loose ends around my back. Again, this is a totally unnecessary step that I'm just doing because I don't like this ragged edge. Okay, there we go. I was gonna make a knot there that I didn't want to make. Just don't worry about that. So here we are, and I'm just going to go back and see if I can grab somewhere under here to loop through the one side and tack down on the other. So what I wanted is this stitch to go right in between the center of the 4 beads I just laid down, and they're now a lot more sturdy than they were. I'm then going to go up through where I just came from on the beads, and I'm going to loop up next to the bead I just put the stitch in. So I'm between the first bead that got laid down and the second, and I'm going to just push the needle through these 3 beads. And we're not doing any knots or anything, we're just going through, and that way when I lay the next row of beads down, it'll be in line with this row of beads. And I'm going to continue like that. I wanted to show this beading process one more time where I go over a curve because I feel like that might be helpful. So I have my beads lined up. I see where they're gonna go. I am putting my needle under that stitch. Now they're locked in there. And I'm just going to do it one more time so I can tie a little knot because these are on the outside, so they have a chance of getting knocked around a lot more, and I don't want them to break. I'm going to do the thing where I pull the thread through the loop as I'm tightening it so that it makes a small knot. So I got all these beads here, and I'm going to go back and secure them 2 at a time. I always start from the opposite side that I just tied down, so what I'm going to do is hide the progress of my thread by just sticking it into the felt and sort of going in between the layers. Because I don't want my thread to be visible, but it's also not going through the back. So I'm just going to, like, shove it through here a little bit, you know? See how it goes. So, of the beads I put on, here is the first 2. And I am at a position where I'm just going to, 1, 2, okay, here's where I want to knot it. I'm going to poke through the felt, but on the back, I'm not poking past this line of beads. So I'm doing this. And at this point in time, we have not hooked any beads yet. this is simply lining up where I'm going to put the stitch. Now I'm going to do the exact same stitch again. And since I didn't go through the back, I am now looping in these beads. So I'm just going to line it up with the 2 beads that I want to make sure that it holds down in the right spot. And as I say that, it moves. So those 2 beads are now tacked down. And I'm going to move, just again in the felt, 2 more spots over. Get my needle to be round. Oh, I'm in beads. I'm in bead territory. Oh, okay. So we're here. Next 2 beads. I'm going to go through. So 1, 2. All right, we're going through here. We're at the back. I'm not going through the back beads. So I'm just going to like gently hold this back as I do it. I'm just going through excess felt here. I'm going to do the exact same thing again, push the needle through in the exact spot I just went through, taking care to not hit any of the beads. And just gently, I'm going to guide the thread to the set of beads that I want. Now, since this bead is in the center of a divot, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm pushing my thread right so that it's at the tip of this indent. And I'm just going to loop over this next bead. Even though it's not 2 away, I want this one secured right in the place that I need it. So I'm going under this bead. And I'm just sort of like grabbing the space between it, if I can get it to focus. And I'm just going to loop it as close as I can into that felt that's in the divot. So this is what my stitch looks like. And since I only have a little bit of the felt actually nicked in this stitch, it's going to pull down to where the felt that I have is, and it's just going to tug this in a little bit. Now I'm going to knot this off a couple times because since there's extra pressure when it's pulled in, I don't want that to result in like a breaking of the line. So I will be knotting this and then continuing on with the rest of it. Now that I have my finished beaded piece, I can do an optional thing. I want to attach this to my shirt as it is a poppy, so I'm going to fasten a sewing pin into the back and have it so that I can pin it to things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see, where roughly does the different pieces of the pin sit, and then I'm going to make a little hole here and a little hole here and thread the pin through. That's not usually how I make this hole because I don't have my good scissors around. I guess that's what we're doing today. So I'm just gonna do what I can to finagle this through here. So my holes are pretty messy because I didn't have good scissors. I recommend making sure you have good scissors when doing beading. But I'm just going to hook just the main part of the pin. And then I'm going to pin it just so that I am not going to poke myself while I do this. But I have some string that was anchored in from when I was finishing that. You can anchor in your string however you like, And so I'm going to use my same technique for hiding the string by just sticking it into the sandwich and popping it up around where I want it to be. And I want it to be right on the line of where the pin is. And then I'm going to do this thing where I just go under and over the felt with the metal inside of it. And this is going to slowly wrap the pin up so that it's more secured to your beadwork, and so it won't come out in the future. And this also keeps it from wobbling around on your shirt as much once you are wearing it. I like to go up and down the length of the pin with stitches a couple times just because I like this. I like to be overkill with the security. And I'm also going to tie many knots in this. Once I'm confident with the amount of knots that I've put in, and my safety pin is more or less very secure within my project, I'm going to once again do the same thing where I just pull with a little bit of tension. I put my needle into the fabric, I put it out somewhere random, I pull it a little bit tight, then I cut it, and the excess thread is now hidden inside my project. This is now a finished and wearable pin, and you could pin it to anything you want now. You just have to pull this open, and then let's just say this is your fabric. We all know how safety pins work. Just gonna tab it in. There you go. Got a beaded poppy. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'm going to make some more beading videos, and I will learn to be keeping my beading in frame better, and yes, I hope you learned.